There comes a season in every person's life when holding on begins to feel heavier than letting go. Your soulmate may have quietly entered that season. It did not happen because everything suddenly became easier. In many ways, life continued asking the same questions it always had. Responsibilities remained. Plans continued changing. The future still carried uncertainty, yet something within them had begun responding differently. For years, they believed that every important outcome depended entirely on their ability to control it. If they planned carefully enough, if they prepared for every possibility, if they anticipated every disappointment, then perhaps life would finally feel safe. That belief shaped countless decisions. It influenced the way they approached relationships, the way they handled change, even the way they spoke to themselves during difficult moments. But recently, something unexpected happened. Not an event that changed the world around them, a realization that quietly changed the world within them. It arrived during an ordinary afternoon. They had been thinking about several things at once, trying to solve problems that had no immediate solution. The harder they searched for certainty, the more exhausted they became. Finally, they stopped. Not because they had found every answer, but because they realized they could not force clarity to appear before its time. That simple decision created an unfamiliar feeling. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to sit with uncertainty instead of fighting against it. At first, it felt uncomfortable. The mind immediately wanted to return to planning, to predicting, to controlling every possible outcome. But the heart gently asked a different question. What if peace begins the moment I stop demanding certainty? They had never considered that possibility before. For so long they believed uncertainty was something to defeat. Now they were beginning to wonder if uncertainty could also become a teacher. That thought stayed with them. As the days passed, they started noticing how often fear had disguised itself as responsibility. How often overthinking had disguised itself as preparation. How often emotional control had disguised itself as strength. These realizations were not easy to accept. They challenged beliefs that had guided them for years. Yet with every honest reflection, another layer of pressure quietly disappeared. They no longer felt responsible for controlling every chapter of their future. Instead, they became responsible for how they chose to live today. That difference changed everything. They became more present during conversations, more grateful for ordinary moments, more willing to appreciate progress instead of demanding perfection. For the first time in a long while, they noticed how much beauty had always existed around them. A peaceful sunrise, a sincere smile, a conversation that lasted a little longer than expected, a quiet evening that required nothing except gratitude. These moments had always been there. They had simply been too busy chasing certainty to notice them. Now they understand that life often reveals its greatest gifts to those who stop trying to control every detail. Perhaps this is the lesson your soulmate has been preparing to receive. Not every answer arrives on your schedule. Not every blessing announces itself with certainty. Sometimes the greatest transformation begins the moment we trust life enough to loosen our grip. And perhaps that quiet decision is opening a future more meaningful than anything they could have planned themselves. As this new understanding settles into their heart, your soulmate may begin noticing that letting go is not the same as giving up. For a long time, they believed those two ideas were connected. They assumed that releasing control meant becoming careless, that trusting life meant abandoning responsibility, that accepting uncertainty meant lowering their standards. Now they are beginning to see the difference. Letting go is not the absence of effort. It is the decision to stop carrying burdens that were never meant to be carried alone. This realization has brought an unexpected sense of relief. Instead of waking each morning with the pressure to solve every problem, they have started asking a different question. What is the most honest step I can take today? That simple shift has changed everything. The future no longer feels like something they must constantly conquer. It has become something they are willing to meet with patience and trust. As the days continue, they notice another quiet transformation. They are becoming kinder to themselves. There was a time when every mistake felt like proof that they had failed. Every delay felt like they were falling behind. Every unanswered question created anxiety. But now they understand that growth rarely follows a perfect timeline. Some lessons require waiting. Some answers require silence. Some opportunities appear only after we become the person capable of recognizing them. This awareness has softened the way they speak to themselves. Instead of criticizing every imperfect decision, they have begun celebrating every small step forward. Progress now matters more than perfection. Presence matters more than pressure. Peace matters more than constant achievement. Perhaps this is why they have become more attentive to the simple moments surrounding them. A meaningful conversation, a familiar smile, the comfort of a quiet evening, the feeling of gratitude after an ordinary day. They once believed these moments were too small to matter. Now they understand that a meaningful life is built from thousands of ordinary moments, noticed with extraordinary awareness. Another realization has quietly emerged. They no longer believe that strength comes from carrying everything alone. Real strength comes from knowing when to pause, when to ask for wisdom instead of immediate answers, when to trust that not every chapter needs to be understood before it can be lived. That understanding has given them a freedom they did not know was possible. They spend less time comparing their journey with others, less time worrying about whether they are moving quickly enough, more time appreciating how far they have already come. This shift has changed the atmosphere within their heart. Hope now replaces much of the fear that once guided their decisions. Curiosity has begun replacing constant worry. Faith has quietly taken the place of control. Perhaps that is the hidden gift of this season. Life was never asking them to predict every outcome. It was inviting them to become someone who could remain steady, even when the outcome remained unknown. Now they understand that uncertainty is not always an obstacle. Sometimes it is an invitation to grow, to trust, to discover strengths that only appear when familiar plans no longer exist. As they continue walking this path, they recognize that many of the blessings in their life arrived unexpectedly. The most meaningful conversations were unplanned. The greatest lessons appeared through challenges. The moments that shaped them most deeply often began as ordinary days that seemed no different from any other. That realization fills them with gratitude. They no longer need every experience to make immediate sense. They trust that understanding often arrives later, when the heart is ready to receive it. Perhaps this is the greatest transformation of all. Not that life has become easier, but that they have become wiser. They no longer define success only by what they achieve. They define it by the peace they carry, by the kindness they offer, by the honesty they choose, by the courage to keep moving forward, without demanding certainty from every tomorrow. And perhaps that is the truth their soul has been trying to reveal all along. Sometimes the future changes not because we finally gain control, but because we finally discover the courage to release it. When that happens, the heart no longer walks through life driven by fear. It begins walking with quiet confidence, a confidence that says, I may not know everything that lies ahead, but I know who I am becoming. And sometimes, that single realization becomes the beginning of the most meaningful chapter a person will ever live.